fast. The Wizard of War Machine, it's a Bally Midway 1981, and it's one of those Darrow machines that's just perfect. It is
Cool.
Gorgeous.
That is super cool.
And the Pango is, I think the monitor needs to be recapped, but it works. It's all working. But he's like, just be keeping in mind that might need to be recapped. But the Pango is just as good. It's really, we've got some really good quality machines these days.
Yeah.
We really have. Like that Tutankhamun. That one. That's a mint machine.
Yeah.
The Ghosts and Goblins.
Ghosts and Goblins is nice. York Kung Fu looks great.
Yeah. York Kung Fu is nice. I see Phoenix back there. God. You know what we do need? And I wonder if I can order this? A light for the Dig Dug marquee. Is that just a power brick thing, or is it the actual light?
Since we got the power brick that'll go back in there, yeah, it's because there's not a connection to it. The light itself actually works.
Right, so we got the power brick, and then we can put the other one back in the battle zone.
Right.
Tell you, the battle zone and the missile command PCBs are like near impossible to find.
Yeah.
And they're expensive. But I have seen them. One of the guys, like, I'll sell you only 2 battle zones for $700. Like, I have to buy both.
Right, exactly. It's like, I don't need 2. Waiting out your stock. Alright, 20 seconds.
I can't see the countdown, so all I can see.
I opened Twitch in a separate tab just because I was curious.
Oh, can you share the link in Slack?
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, that's cool.
Zach and Finn, his computer's struggling a little bit. What have we done to you, Zach? If you think the whole browser source OBS Ninja thing is causing an issue, you could just go back to screen share and whereby, or we could just use that. Yeah, fine. I don't know if that has any bearing on it or not. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, I should be live streaming to some extent, streaming a few frames every now and then, I guess. We'll see how it looks out there. But yeah, the Twitch stream manager, the monitor is telling me that the bitrate is still pretty shaky. So we are, as you can see, live with a couple of guest speakers. I have Tim Owens and Jim Groom here to my, this way. Which way are they? I can't remember if I couldn't remember if my video was flipped or not, but they're over that way. So they are here to tell us a little bit about their what would you call it? Experiment, endeavor, enterprise, Reclaim Arcade. So let's just check a little bit of audio. Can you guys just say hi and make sure that your audio is coming through?
Hey folks, my name's Tim Owens. I'm sitting here in Reclaim Arcade. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jim Groom, and I'm sitting here in Italy with a simulacra of Reclaim Arcade behind me. What's real, what's not?
Yeah.
Fake news.
Indeed. It's just a question. Yeah, that's the big one. So it as you can see, I think it is ultimately my computer is struggling to deal with all of these different video inputs at once and try to render them and stream them at the same time. So I do want to why don't we just try switching real quick to just the whereby thing. I'm going to try to disable the OBS OBS Ninja thing that we were just using. So if Jim and Tim, if you could stay in whereby, and I'll activate your video from there, and then I'll see if I can pull that into my my streaming situation a little bit better, and that might improve some things. Let's try this. I'm gonna kill this one. Just remove Tim. Removed him. Yeah, and students, if you're still out there, hopefully still watching, make sure you say hi and good morning so I can keep a track of whoever's here. And as you can see, I've got Tim and Jim in our Discord as well as special guests, so they can answer questions and chat there as well. So we've got Timmy Boy and Jim Groom. Okay, so let's see. That already seems to have helped a little bit. Okay, let me see if I can cut this one out too, and kill this one. I'm just kind of killing things here. So this seems to be, my computer seems to be relaxing a little bit. It was kind of freaking out, and now it seems to be calming down. So that's
kind of like a video game. You're just going through killing things.
Yeah, I am, and that seems to be helping. Although my stream is still a little shaky, but I think it's good. Okay, so let me pull you back in here with. Yeah, even OBS is slow, but it's okay. All right, so I'm just going to put you guys in kind of crudely here, but that will work. Actually, you know what I can do is I'm just going to crop whereby.
I was going to say, if you're going to crop anyone, crop Tim, not me.
Yeah, I'll make sure to make you extra large.
Thank you.
Could do like a face-off situation, like half of mine and half of Jim's.
Oh, that would be cool.
That would be a mind meld. But what if we have different ideas? Yeah. Reclaim Arcade. All you need to know, here's the short version of the class. It's awesome.
Yeah. All right.
TLDR.
They say they can at least hear us fine.
Yeah, that's
it's
good.
Just they can't see all the gloriousness of our moving image.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's I think it's up to. I mean, it's better. So, it says it's broadcasting at. I'm at 3,000 kilobits a second now, and the bit rate. Yeah, the bit rate is calming down on the dashboard. So, okay, I think we're basically good to go. And this is all being broadcast and recorded on Twitch. And I have noticed that sometimes as you broadcast through Twitch, it sometimes actually records in slightly better. It kind of puts the audio video streams together a little bit more tightly than they sometimes appear live. So good morning again, and welcome to the class. This is Games and Culture Day 4. AKA week 4 of this class that we're doing in a very condensed fashion. So far this week, we've covered some of the highlights of video game history. Not really going in depth on as many things as I'd like, but this is where we are. This is what we're trying to do this semester or this term over 3 weeks, and I think it's going okay. So today this is Jim Groom and Tim Owens, as we've already said, and they are co-owners of a location called Reclaim Arcade that's going to be opening up soon. And what I wanted to do today is say a few words about just the history of video game arcades. Not a whole lot, not a lecture, but just to kind of give you some background, and then kind of find out what Jim and Tim have been doing as a project that in many ways helps preserve and provide access to important historical artifacts from video game history, but also is a fun and interesting space that they've created. So let me, I thought about doing a whole lecture, but instead I thought maybe I would just show a clip from a movie, because that's kind of what I've been doing a lot of in this class, actually showing a lot of clips and commercials and things. The movie Tron came out in, oh man, I should have looked it up to double check the year. Was it 1982? Do you guys know that off the top of your head? I want to say it's 1982.
I think it was 82, but I would have to check. I'll check for you. Hold on.
Okay, thanks. It's a movie about humans that become trapped inside of a computer. To kind of summarize it very briefly, there was a sequel, Tron Legacy, that came out a few years ago, and it was pretty good. Actually, a lot of people didn't like it. I liked it, but it had some, there were some missed opportunities. But I think it was a pretty cool movie, and it kind of built out the mythology of the Tron universe a little bit. But anyway, I just wanted to show a scene from early on in the movie where two characters they have a problem with their master control system, and they need to visit Flynn, who is this brilliant hacker who also happens to own an arcade. And so they visit him at his arcade, and this is like a 2-minute scene from that. And I'm just going to play that scene just to give you a sense of the environment and the space of an arcade. So let me just do that, and then we'll say a few words about it, and then we'll go into Q&A.
I want to go to Flynn's place.
What for?
To warn him
What?
that Dillinger's onto him.
I don't see why I have to do that guy any favors. I don't know what you ever saw in that guy.
We all should be able to
I
hear
love
the
him for
audio.
his brain. Oh, don't put any change in the meter. We're gonna need it for the game. Boy, haven't been here in a long time. Hey, Mommy, I'm here!
Let's go. Where is he?
I don't know, somewhere in here. Lost in one of his games.
Use the bus button, idiot.
Excuse me, champ. Do you know where Flynn is?
Yeah, he's over there on his machine.
Hey, look, somebody's got 300,000.
Itself. Okay, well, I'm back now, I think. So let's see. I don't know what I said that was not
Yeah,
working.
I did hear you. You are back online live.
Okay, yeah, it looks like I'm good now. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know. I really don't know what happened. It just the stream.
I tell you, watching that, Zach, because I did see it one frame every second, and that was great. But it didn't matter because it allowed you to focus on the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really struck me about that soundtrack was how prevalent a game that we have. It's actually behind Tim. You can see it flashing in the all the way back called Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And you can hear that 8-bit of the things coming down. And it's interesting because that soundtrack, that one exactly. That soundtrack is really almost a cacophony of different games from that era, 1981, 80. I can't help when I see an image of that Flynn's arcade to try and identify games. You can hear Tempest, you can hear Phoenix, you can hear Missile Command. You can hear some of these distinct elements of games at that time. And it's such a clean, cool looking arcade. I'd never been in one that was actually that clean.
Really? Yeah. That's what I was going to ask too. Is what your memories of actual arcades, and I also I don't recall them being that exciting. I guess I mean they were cool, but never that crowded. The idea that there's that many people there, and the ceiling is so high. That's not a thing that I recall. My main arcade was actually putt golf, a mini golf course that also had an arcade. That was my go-to.
So when I was starting going to arcades, it was probably 1980, 81, and I would go to a place up the block from me, literally, and it was a billiard, it was a pool hall, and it was pretty shady. A lot of people would go there and they would play pool, and there was this little dark corner where they had Battle Zone, Make Tracks, Pac-Man, Defender, a Pole Position, and probably a couple other games on this Robotron. But a really kind of memorable selection. But you would go in there, you would get your quarters, but there would be folks your parents would be "You're going to the pool hall," and I was on Long Island, and it was just kind of it was associated. The games at that point were associated with kind of a social blight, they came in, and then you would find them at pizzerias. A lot of people would play them at grocery stores. But they were kind of everywhere.
Yeah. And so you were doing this was you grew up in New York, right?
Long Island,
Long
yep.
Island, yeah. So that, as you may know, that location, like New York, is sort of infamous in the history of video games and their notoriety. Mayor LaGuardia ran a big campaign against pinball machines and did a big like photo op thing of him like smashing one with a sledgehammer, kind of like to kind of prove that he was standing up against deviancy, and like that these were, because the big controversy at the time was like, is this gambling or is it a skill based activity? And so if they're gambling, they're illegal. So let's destroy them. And there's been other things like that, throughout the history of coin operated amusements, where a community decides that they want to get rid of them and they smash them or throw them in the river or something like that.
It's
So,
interesting. On that note, speaking of Long Island and video games, I believe, and I could be wrong, so correct me, that the first reputed video game was developed at the Holbrook Labs on Long Island, Pong. And that was actually, it was a game that was developed in a lab on Long Island, and that started the kind of beginning of what we know as video gaming in terms of like Pac-Man, Space Invaders, all that's to follow, that's to create that kind of cabinet craze that Tim has right behind him. Donkey Kong, right? Like all of that.
Yeah. So are you thinking about Tennis for Two? I think that's, we did that game history thing, and the Tennis for Two was kind of a demo, and it uses an oscilloscope, and you can bounce a ball back and forth. And the story, as I understand it, is Nolan Bushnell saw that demo allegedly, and I think he denies it or something, but he probably did see it, and then that gave him the idea to make Pong, and then he went from there. But there was a big legal fight over it, basically, because Tennis for Two was essentially presented as evidence of prior art. So when Ralph Baer had a patent for the idea of doing video games at all, then people tried to challenge that patent, saying, "Oh, this other thing had already been done on Long Island, and it was this Tennis for Two thing," and so it came up that way. But it was never, Tennis for Two itself wasn't ever a commercial product. It took Nolan Bushnell, who had experience in the coin-operated arcade industry, just to realize, hey, we could get people to pay quarters to play this stuff. And then he came up with Computer Space first, which was kind of a dud, and then Pong, which obviously did much better than Computer Space. So yeah.
So obviously I'm talking to the right guy.
I mean, I guess, I don't know. I found, by the way, I was just this to my students, I guess, I was mentioning Computer Space the other day, and Computer Space is famous for being the first arcade game to appear in a movie. It appears in a scene in Soylent Green, and I've not been able to find that scene on YouTube, but I found it, and it's on HBO Max, and so I have a clip of that I've created that I'll upload later. But it's an interesting movie, and you don't need to see the whole movie to understand the context of the scene. It's just kind of a throwaway scene near the beginning, meant to illustrate the life of luxury that the 1% experience, and that's in contrast to everyone else who is starving in the streets. It's a very depressing movie, actually, but it's a little bit too accurate. But I was amused to notice that it's set in the year 2022, so we have a couple years still until we reach that particular hellscape that's in that movie. Anyway, so I had a number of questions I wanted to kind of ask you guys, and of course we can just let the discussion go. But maybe, I don't know, Tim, since you're actually in the arcade right now, could you just kind of give us the basic overview of like what is Reclaim Arcade, and what do you have, and what can people expect to see if they come visit?
Yeah, absolutely. So Reclaim Arcade is kind of an interesting idea. Jim and I started collecting arcade games not that long ago. Was it 2 years ago, Jim? 2.5 maybe? I think it was summer of 2017 or 18 that we got Centipede. And we found someone in Richmond had one in their living room, and we went down to see it, and it was in mint condition. It was a beautiful game, and we were like, should we buy this? Like, we could put this in the office. This could be kind of fun. And we were like, wow, this is interesting. So we rented a U-Haul truck, and we went down there, picked it up, brought it back to the office, had it here in the office, and everybody was playing it. And we were like, this is a lot of fun. This is cool. It's kind of like office furniture, right? And so we had it that summer. The following, and then we did good for like 6 months. Like, it wasn't until like January of the next year that I started following a couple Facebook groups of people who buy and sell arcade games. And we ended up finding a guy that was selling several games at once for a really good deal. And at the time, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, we got Asteroids, we got Galaga,
Galaxian.
Kangaroo, Galaxian, Kangaroo,
And one
and
more, Defender.
Defender. So we got those 4 games all in one go, and we were like, "Oh my god! Now we have 5 games. Like this is pretty incredible." And I mean, and like that's when the addiction really started setting in because we were like, "Well, if we have 5, could we have 9? Could we have 10? How many?" And so we kept saying like, "How many games do you have to have before you're allowed to call yourself an arcade?" And of course our office mates are like, "What's going on here?" Like we went from just like office furniture to like, "Do you still have room for us to work here? What's going?" So by that summer, we had probably 12 or 13 games, a modest collection of really great ones. We had Joust at that point. We had Galaga. We had several different really classic machines, Pac-Man. And
Tron.
yeah, yeah. So we had gotten a lot of really good ones, and we were enjoying it and joking about Reclaim Arcade, but not really too serious. Maybe Jim probably was. But then the folks next door to us actually moved out of their space. We're in a strip mall area, and so there's no real way to like expand other than the fact that if your tenant next door leaves and the ability presents itself, you can take over. So I contacted the landlord. He actually contacted me and asked if we were interested, and I was like, maybe. And so like as soon as that opened up, we were like, I was like, yeah, Reclaim Arcade, Reclaim Arcade, Reclaim Arcade. So of course Reclaim Hosting is our main business, and so we constantly put the Reclaim moniker on just about everything. And so we took over that space thinking, yeah, let's think through what it might look like to actually open an arcade over there. And as it turned out, we moved a bunch of games over there, and we're like, this isn't really big enough for what we were hoping to do, because we were taking a lot of inspiration at the time from arcade bars like the Circuit down in Richmond. If you've ever been there, that's a decent one to look at. We were looking at Quarter Horse down in Durham, which we had visited when we ran a conference. Ground Control, which is in Portland. So, I mean, obviously the arcade bar concept was becoming really popular, and we thought we could probably do this in a really, in a really different and interesting way. But the space next door wasn't big enough, so we were like, let's swap the two. So this actually was our old office. We moved our offices next door, and this is what became Reclaim Arcade.
Cool.
We did have a lot of bigger plans. As I said, we were going to be an arcade bar. We were going to have the self-pour taps, where you could walk up and put your card up and pour your own beer, wine, and cider. We were going to have a kitchen that served a full menu, including Italian panzerotti, which is basically like fried pizza, which
Nice.
who doesn't love fried pizza? Like, one day maybe we'll get there. But we were slated to open in May of last year, and so we got to March timeframe where we were about to sign off on a lot of construction, and then of course the entire world shut down. So we had to put a pause on everything. We were very lucky in terms of the timing, even though we were completely unlucky in the year that we decided we were going to open an entertainment venue. But the timing couldn't have been better because we had not yet signed off on a very expensive bill of construction. And so we said, let's just put the brakes on everything. And we did. And when we came back to it around summer and thought, okay, well, COVID's not going away, but are we still interested? Yeah, we're still, I mean, we have the space and meanwhile, we had still been buying games. So like, remember when I said we had 12 or 13? At this point, by the time we had closed things down and we were just kind of waiting out COVID, we had 40 games that were all kind of stored in one room and just kind of waiting. And so I started moving the games back in here, and I thought, okay, well, what if I just start arranging the games and put the pinball machines back and change out the light bulbs to different colored bulbs and things? What can we do on our own? So this space more now has become, I think, and I think Jim would agree to me, a reflection of our own passion rather than just sort of what an architect came up with for what Reclaim Arcade could be. This is what we envision it being, which I think is really special and kind of interesting too. And at this point now we have, Jim, do you know the exact number? I believe it's 52, somewhere around there, arcade games, and then
so cool.
another 7 pinball machines.
57.
57.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
you have a lot of
So
great
we have
information on the
over
website
50.
too. I'll put
Yeah.
the link to the website in the chat because it's really actually I should not open that tab because that's you guys' video, but it's reclaimarcade.com, right? So if you go to that page, it's I'll just type it in the chat or you all can, but it's
I got it.
okay, thanks. Yeah, and there's a nice page where it's got, you can see like images or in some cases GIFs of the gameplay of several of the games, and I think that's a really cool way to share the collection basically and make it easy to kind of marvel at it as opposed to just like a list of names. Like it's really, I mean, I appreciate the attention to detail on that particular page to show that detail.
And that was actually someone who designed the website came up in collaboration. I love that games page too, but it's an interesting thing. And Tim mentioned it while he was talking, is he quickly found a forum called the Killer List of Video Games, Clove, which anyone can go to, which is amazing.
Yes.
And then you can also go, and Facebook groups abound with people who are trading and selling this. And what I was blown away by is that you think these games, like I grew up with them, so the games were like these magical things. Like you could never own a Pac-Man, you could never own an Asteroids, but as you get into these communities, which Tim was smart enough to kind of really lock in, like you can buy an Asteroids machine for like $800. You can buy a really nice Pac-Man for like $700 because there's a lot of them. And a lot of people have kept them in very good shape, and there's a really robust market. That like people are like selling not only the games as whole, but all sorts of parts for games, joysticks, PCBs or the actual board with all the information, basically the motherboard of the game, power supplies, monitors. It's a really kind of interesting culture of old school classic game, like they call themselves collectors. First and foremost. So like there's a hierarchy. The first place you go to sell is Clove, where you would sell it to another collector. If no one goes there, then you go to like Facebook. And then at last resort, if no one goes on Facebook, you go to eBay. And every time your price point gets higher. So you get really good deals on Clove. Facebook, you can hit or miss, and then eBay, they're ripping you off. And it's like the whole forum culture of this old school arcade forum is all about people always coming on saying one of two things. Oh, if I lived closer, I'd buy it. And then the other one is, that's way too much money, because they're really protective over the hobby and over the kind of collectorness of it. So they don't want it to get to a point where it's just purely out of the reach of anyone to buy and do work on a game.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's a really interesting culture that we kind of fell into because we wanted to do this. And it's quite interesting. I love that part of it, frankly.
Yeah. There's a lot of great information there, I'm sure, in terms of troubleshooting and debugging and finding replacement parts and things like that. Have you all had to do much repair work on any of the machines or restoration?
Yeah, he's pointing over at me. So you have to. I mean, these games are 40 plus years old, some of them. Many of them are around that now. And so there's no getting past it. It's amazing that they're even still running. But I can't go and buy a CRT tube monitor from Best Buy. Like I can't go and buy those parts. Luckily, to Jim's point, there's enough of a collector community that there are websites that are selling reproduction parts for certain things that help. And there's an active community of people trying to help people maintain them. But yeah, really from the get-go, I had to learn. I believe my first repair was on that centipede. The fire button had stopped working, and I was like, oh, here we go. Because, I mean, I had remembered the first time I opened up the back of a centipede, and I'm wondering, I can actually see if I can get one open here for you. Let's see. No, these aren't open. Oh, yeah. Here. So this is Pac-Man. I can open up the back of this just so that you all can get a sense of what this looks like. But I opened up, like, imagine, so me looking at Centipede, and I looked into the Pac-Man, and I mean, that's what the motherboard on it looks like. The thing, I mean, here's a hand for scale. Like, the thing is huge, huge. Yeah. And I was like, oh dear God, I hope this thing never breaks. And then you've got the whole monitor assembly and everything else in there. And I'm looking at all this and going, I don't know what I'm looking at. And I just shut it back up. So the fire button stopped working. And I was like, here we go. Like, this is going to be the first thing. And it's our very first game anyway. And I looked it up online, and they're like, oh, it's this thing called a leaf switch. When you're pressing down, it's connecting two pieces of metal, and that's what makes it, you know, complete the connection. Sometimes those get dirty, and they said, take a business card, stick it between there, and just rub it, and take a piece of sandpaper and rub between the contacts. And I did that, and it worked. And I was just
That's
like,
awesome. Yeah.
Here we go. Like,
yeah.
So that really empowered me. I was like, I can find this information and I can fix these things. So I did. So, and it's been constant. I mean, I can point to an issue right now. Sorry, I'm going to move around again, but
no, please do. This is great.
You know, I'm looking over just now, and the Smash TV that we have is having an issue, which has been recurring. And what it actually is it's getting sometimes not enough and sometimes too much power from the power supply in there. And when it does that, the controller starts to freak out in there. And so the video signal gets all warped and stuff. So
interesting.
Yeah, when you have this many games, it's not unlikely that little glitches and stuff. We've gotten really good because of that about buying spare boards, buying spare parts and things. And I actually have in the back here, which I'll walk over and show you, I set up as part of Reclaim Arcade a whole workshop space.
Go, cool.
So that I would have a place to actually work on the games. And so I've got a workbench back here, you know, room for that. There's some of the games that we're working on currently. So yeah, it's a nice little space back here that I can actually work on them. That kind of keeps it out of the main arcade space too. But our hope is that as many as possible we can keep online and that we can keep running in pretty good condition.
Yeah.
The last time I was back there, Zach, we spent a good part of the 2 weeks just getting games back online. Like Pac-Man had a monitor issue. PCBs weren't working. Qbert, as you could see, was back there. Like, but it's a constant taken care of. Tim was smart though, because at the very beginning, probably like 9 months into our kind of addiction to these things, he actually got a kit. Basically, someone was like, I was going to put back together the Smash TV you saw. You always see this often on Clove or any of the forums. They're like, here's a kit for sale because I don't have the time, or I don't have the energy, or I don't have the money right now. And so you can pick up a kit where a lot of the stuff is there, but you have to assemble it. So Tim did that for Smash TV and learned a ton in the process. That was pretty awesome to watch.
Yeah, I think I saw some. Tim's been blogging a lot about these different different parts of the job, different projects, and different things that you've been learning. I think that's really cool to see all that too, and see all the. I mean, you're creating a great resource for people like me who want to learn more about this stuff and just kind of appreciate it. And so that's really cool that you've been able to put that together. Thank you. Thanks for sharing the tag there. And I just want to say to students out there, by the way, I mean, you probably have figured this out already, but you can, if you have a question while we're talking, I have a few more questions that I have planned to ask, but if you have a question you'd like to ask, then of course the Discord chat is a place to do that. And of course it'll appear above me on the stream, and our guests will be happy to answer, I'm sure. Or if there's something in particular behind Tim that you'd like a closer look at, I'm sure he'd be willing to take you over there to take a look at it.
I realized I didn't even talk about or show the entrance of Reclaim Arcade. And I don't know if that's something coming later in the questions and that kind of stuff, but there are other elements of the space too.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, that'd be cool to see too. And yeah, maybe talk about the location, because I know many students are local and they might want to come check it out. So
Jim, while I go over there, maybe it would be good for you to talk a little bit about the history of Reclaim Video.
Oh yeah, good point. We lost your audio, Jim. I can't hear you.
No, that makes sense. I'm sorry, I muted myself.
There you go.
But Tim's point actually brings us back to UMW around 2015.
Yeah.
So Tim and I both worked at UMW for a number of years before we went out and started a hosting company completely separate from Reclaim Arcade, although it's called Reclaim Hosting. And we worked as instructional technologists on the ground at UMW, and we had a lot of fun there. A lot of the stuff that you'll see here in some ways was inspired by some of the work we did at UMW. In particular, and I'll talk about the other project at UMW in a second, this idea of recreating spaces from another time. So Tim right now is in the entrance to Reclaim Arcade, which is a working, fully operational 1980s VHS store. And it's awesome. This is one of, I think, the greatest spaces on earth in my mind. Like with the arcades, what went hand in hand with video arcades in that era is also the VHS store. And this is before somehow people think Blockbuster's cool. Blockbuster isn't cool. The mom and pop VHS stores from the 80s is everything. And this is kind of trying to reproduce that within the limits. It's a very kind of, how would I say, idiosyncratic collection, because a lot of it is based on stuff I wanted to buy. So I wouldn't say it's completely representative, but I think the space is. And this is actually working. We let people take out tapes. We are not renting VCRs just yet because they're hard to get, at least working ones, but we are trying to renew them and get a couple fixed, but they're almost too expensive at this point to give out VCRs without the idea of them breaking. And I find a lot of people of a certain generation, meaning the people in your class probably, have no idea how to work them. Like, they're completely foreign in terms of technology and how to use it. And that was one of the funnest things of another project I actually had the real pleasure of working with your professor, Zach Whalen, on creating. So if we go into the Reclaim Arcade, Reclaim Video, where you'll be checking in to Reclaim Arcade, you walk through that door like Tim right now, and the first thing you see after the arcade is this. This is Reclaim. This is not Reclaim Living Room. This is the UMW console living room. So
this is so cool. I haven't seen this yet.
This is a reproduction of a living room.
I'll add some extra light just for now.
Oh, man.
This is an actual 80s living room that Zach and I built as a kind of idea of what it means to kind of be at home and dealing with media in the 1980s. And it's a particular moment. Zach can speak about it much more eloquently than me. But when all things like the VCR, the Betamax, cable TV, all of them start to converge in the home and in the living room. So we did a lot. We added VCRs, VHS, Betamax, Laserdisc. We have actually 3,000 Laserdiscs.
Oh my gosh.
We got this kind of like fire sale. Someone wanted to get rid of them all at once, so we got them. But this is pretty cool. We had a couple of consoles like the Atari 2600, the 5200, and we have Rock and Sock'em, some VHS tapes. We have a Fisher. It's a pretty, and this again is fully functional. And I think this comes out of the work Zach did at UMW in 2015 and on after that, with the idea of not make it just a museum, but make it something that people can sit in, people can kind of explore, and people can play. And I think that living room right there is a real testament and kind of, an ode to the work that in 2015 we did with the 1980s living room in the ITCC at the time, which is now the Hurley Convergence Center. And so it's pretty cool that there's a real link between the work at UMW and what we tried to recreate here. So it's a trifecta. It's the Reclaim VHS video store. It's the UMW console living room. And then once you're done there, you walk through to the main event and you can see it right through those doors. It's framed beautifully.
That is so cool.
This is the 60 plus video games and pinball Reclaim Arcade. That is just next level awesome. I think of it as kind of like an art project. Like we recreated to the degree we could kind of 1980s between 79 and 84 arcade. And it's just brilliant. Now there's something behind Tim that adds just another element to the whole space that Tim, I don't know if you want to talk about, but I love what you did there.
I can for sure. Yeah. We had the space of so the pinball room is over there in the corner. And I mentioned previously, this was our office space. So one of the real tells here is that this was a conference room with glass walls, right? Similar to you might find in the Hurley Convergence Center or something like that. above it, all of this was painted orange. And I thought, orange is not going to fit with the colors and the scheme that we're going for. We were going to have an artist come and paint a mural on there. And, we have a good friend, Ryan Seslow, up in New York, who was looking at some options, but he was like, oh man, with COVID, I don't know if I can travel. This is going to be really hard to come up there. And I said, what if I mounted projectors and we turned the entire wall into a video wall? So,
That's
so that's
cool.
what we did. So there's actually 3 projectors mounted in different locations, and they're all kind of mapped seamlessly. And so you get this moving image, and I can, that's a computer. I can literally go on there and put whatever I want on it. I've got it all. There's a desktop computer up in the ceiling, a very small one there, and I connect to it remotely on my laptop. Go in here and example, and I'll take out the outrun style video. Let's put in, I've got an aquarium, which is fun. Let's see the fish going everywhere.
Tim did this while he's getting that up. I'll just note, Tim had this idea probably the first week in December. The second week of December was done before the new year. Absolute project where he was hanging video projectors from the ceiling. He was doing short throw. It was just amazing.
That is Tim gets things done. That's what
so there's our aquarium now.
That's so cool.
So I think it's a really cool effect, and it really did something different, I think, than just even a mural. It would have been a nice piece of art, but now I feel like, especially the fact that we can still pull in the artists from New York and say, create content for this wall and just send it to us digitally, and we can put it up there. It really enables us to partner not just with him, but with many different people, and to really make it a rotating, canvas of things that we might want to put up there. So I think it's a blast to look at. It's a lot of fun. It was a very cool project because I've never done anything with seamless projector mapping before. So
yeah, that's so cool. It looks great, and I mean, I had not seen the living room space until just now. That's amazing. I love that you got that. I mean, I knew you all had that stuff, and I was kind of going to ask if you had any plans for it. But that's beautiful. I love that. The only thing it's missing is the wood paneling walls, but that's okay. I mentioned that to my students that we had done that, and our conversations with the fire inspector about that. That was a whole thing, but that space it continued a little bit in the HCC in a kind of 90s version and with the 90s update, but we had to. It's all in a closet now and getting surplus. It's just we can't, in terms of keeping it clean and limiting people's occupation of that space. It's just something that's too complicated to deal with for social distancing and stuff. So I decided to put everything in storage for now. But I do want to think about other ways to keep that space going or do other versions of it in the future at some point. But we'll see. Yeah,
it was cool too. And when Tim obviously experienced, can you guys hear me? Yeah. Tim actually experienced the ITCC, what we call the 80s living room. And so he saw it, and he saw the work Zach we had done, because Tim at that point had gone full time with Reclaim Hosting, so he was only going to UW to visit. And so when we were we were thinking through Reclaim Arcade on a broader idea. We get together and we just throw ideas at each other. The Reclaim video came out of a joke idea I had, we had this empty strip mall thing, and I was like, what do I think of when I think of an empty strip mall store? That I want to build a VHS store, a mom and pop VHS store. And so we did. And then the same thing happened as we were talking about Reclaim Arcade. We started joking, and I think Tim said, think about it. Think about taking the living room that you all did at UMW and putting it as part of the whole Reclaim Arcade. And I think once he said that, it became really clear that as much as we want to have an arcade and eventually food and alcohol, and that would be great, but we want to create an experience where you come through and you kind of, for a second, you travel through time, you travel back in time, and you kind of think about how technology worked. You think about some of the technology people took for granted, some of the technology that's completely obsolete. Like, I had to pay, to Tim's dismay, like hundreds of dollars to get VCRs working again. People are like, what are you doing with this? This should be like completely like no like brainless technology that no one thinks about. And this technology becomes not only like, you know, out of date and out of style, but it also becomes super hard to maintain and preserve and allow people to use. And that's where it's kind of almost teetering on a museum. It's not, but like for enough time, there's going to be so few VCRs that actually work that they're going to become precious, just like CRT monitors, just like these video games. Like a part of what we're doing is archival.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, I mean, this is anecdotal, but my general impression is that VCRs are harder to find and maintain than CRTs at this point. Like, there's a ton of TVs laying around, and it's possible to convert those into an arcade monitor. At least theoretically, I haven't succeeded yet, but I have one that I plan to work on for that purpose. But the VCR is such a unique thing, and you're talking about these like high-speed motors that slam tape back and forth, and so if those get out of whack, it rips up the tape, and then you're done. Like you've destroyed your media. So it's a real challenge. While you were talking, I found a photo of the original console living room. I pulled it up here. This is off your blog, Jim, but this is it actually in place in the Convergence Center. So if students, if you know that space, this is where if you stepped off the elevator at the fourth floor and turned right, this is what you would have seen for certain time periods during that installation. And you can kind of see the carpet there. That's the distinctive HCC carpet, kind of right there, that little zigzaggy pattern. But we had a stereo there. There's the video disc player, but the TV with the static. The fun thing about that particular TV that I recall was that it would sometimes change channels or turn on and off when someone used the elevator, because it somehow sent an RF signal that the TV interpreted as a remote control signal, which was pretty fun. But the wood paneling there, we installed them as we built walls to attach wood paneling to, and that was ultimately, I guess, the main problem with it in terms of safety, but it definitely, I think, added a lot to the look of it. And I loved spending time in that space and, seeing people react to it, I guess, without any, preparation. I remember so a couple of students came off the elevator and were totally baffled, and they said something like, isn't this building supposed to be new? I can't believe how bad this looks, or something like that. I was like,
I'll tell you,
that's the point. That's it. Yeah.
I have the same kind of, I'm easily nostalgic, hence the 60 some odd video games behind Tim. Yeah. But there is also a sense with what we were doing, and I think you said this brilliantly, Zach, is this provided a kind of laboratory for students to actually sit in, watch some of that, because we also had TV broadcasting across 2 channels. Yeah. We had a full day of TV program that gave you an idea of what it was like to watch TV in the 80s, but also how to play some of that media, how you use that media. And I think it was a really cool space to just reflect and think about that convergence of media that the whole building promised. Tim and I joke that what we've been doing since we left UMW is basically recreating that building for ourselves. Tim created the video wall, which is right behind you. I recreated the living room. The arcade is just another thing, but we really did try and create a space. We have a TV studio in the room to the left of Tim, or right, depending on how you look. But we really do believe in this notion of creating these experimental spaces that you can build, but then other people can come and experience. And it's that idea of space, which I love the virtual. We spend most of our time actually helping people get in the virtual space. But I firmly hold that playing Pac-Man as part of a cabinet with that joystick in that space versus playing it on MAME or something is an absolute, on a CRT, for example, the cabinet with the CRT versus MAME on your computer is an absolutely different experience, all told. right? Just like watching an 80s TV on your flat screen in your living room will never be like coming to that living room with the CRT and the VCR and the reception and watching it there.
Yeah.
I think the experiences are fundamentally different.
Yeah.
And I like that about the space we've created. We've opened some of that up, that they don't have to compete, but I do think it's different. And I love that.
Yeah, it's different. And I think, one thing that this is kind of a aesthetic thing, but, one thing I have found in playing those arcade games that you all have, or my own on a CRT TV, is that I used to think of it in terms of like, let's get as close as possible to the original experience, and like that's our goal. Is like we're trying to like, this is better because it's closer to the way it was. I increasingly find though that it's actually just just better. Like it's not that it's better because it's a better replication than emulation is, but actually like the responsiveness of the controls is much more. There's much more fidelity. There's you get the haptic feedback of the button. You get often smoother graphics on an actual monitor as opposed to an emulator, and it's actually just a objectively better experience. It's not just like, oh, we're taking this nostalgic trip back in time and it's kind of bad. There's an actual quality there that is it's a vintage quality, I guess, but it's actually literally better. And like I think some games are surprisingly compelling and challenging, and even though we're used to things moving much more fast today, I guess, but like if you play a Pong game, it's incredibly challenging. Like it's a very fast-paced game. If you use the I forget what they call them, but the turning the knobs that turn, those that kind of controller, the paddle controller, thanks. Those are even if you're playing that on the Atari with the paddle controller, it's a surprisingly challenging experience. And
even Defender.
Yeah, Defender
is a super hard game.
It is. And my kids, for Christmas, we got them these little handheld retro console things. There's a bunch of things just in emulation. And they like Defender. But I remember, it's a lot harder. But like the colors and the sound, I mean, it's a really visceral kind of game to play in person. And you don't fully get that on the 2.5-inch LCD screen, but it's still, you get the content, but it's not. The experience is what we're interested in, but also like the content is better, like objectively in that original environment.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Speaking of experimentation and the sort of physical versus virtual experience, we haven't talked much about pinball, and this might be a good transition to talk about one project that's back there. But also, I think what's interesting about pinball, and I'll go over there while I talk about it, is that it's kind of interesting. All of these games are from the late 70s, early 80s, right? Like, I think to Jim's point, I think 84 roughly is sort of the ending point for most arcade games. Before then, you have a sort of resurgence. Then you have the home consoles and all that, and you have sort of a resurgence of games into the early 90s and stuff, and then onward. But like obviously Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and some of those Konami games that are behind me, these are more X-Men. Those are like early 90s games, but every other one of these was early 80s, late 70s. But pinball is actually still being created, and most of our pinball machines were created in the last, 10 years or less, 5 years. A lot of them are, some are brand new. So, for example, right here is a Rick and Morty pinball machine. And it is a beautiful thing. Pinball is one of my favorite things to play, and it is just a gorgeous machine here. And then if I go over here, we've got Ghostbusters, Stranger Things. So yeah, last year we bought a Stranger Things pinball machine, and it's so much fun to play. But these are actually, there's a huge resurgence of love for pinball to the point where like those classic machines are being recreated. New pinball machines are being created with themes based on stuff that's just coming out right now. This is an Avengers Infinity Quest pinball machine. And you're probably wondering, and over here we've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Back to the Future. These are two older pinball machines. And by older, these are still early 90s when these two came out. But the rest of them are newer style. But you're probably wondering why that pinball machine looks the way it does, right? It's got a camera connected to it. and it's got all these lights pointed at it. And the reason for that is because we connected up with a group that was looking at how you could connect physical objects to the internet.
So
and
cool.
so that pinball machine is actually connected to the internet, and you all in the class can play it.
Yeah?
I'll put the link in Discord for you all.
I could do
Just so
that.
that you-
You keep on
You
playing.
can do that? Great. Yeah, so if somebody wanted to go on there and play it, they could do so. Sometimes it goes all on its own. While I sit here, sometimes it's like a ghost playing the machine in the background.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah,
But
I
the
love that.
idea behind it, there's actually a Raspberry Pi computer inside of the pinball machine here. Way back inside there, it's almost too dark for you to see, but there's these wires connected to various pieces inside the machine that connect to that computer, so that when people press particular buttons in their browser, it moves the flippers and it plunges the ball when it does things like that. So it allows people on the internet to actually play the pinball machine as if they were here. Now, the problem with that, of course, is latency. It's having to not only send those signals back and forth, but send a live feed of video to you. And pinball really relies on real-time action. You've got to be able to time things very perfectly. So it's a different way of playing, because you're having to play with that delay in mind. You're having to flip the controller before the ball is actually reaching where you would want to hit it. So it's a different way of playing, but it allows people to experience what a game looks like and how it plays to some extent when they're, across the world.
That is really cool. Yeah, I saw this when you shared the link a while ago, and it's a fascinating idea, and I think it's I don't know. I don't think I've tried to play it before, but if students, if you're watching, somebody should try to play it. Do you have to make an account?
One of the downsides is I think you have to have an account, so that may be harder. But I can actually open it up, because I'll definitely already be logged in, and I'll start a game here.
I'll do it, Tim. I can do it while you talk. Yeah.
Okay.
So if Jim, if you're playing, I should be able to see it on the Surrogate TV feed
I'll
too.
play right now.
In fact, I think I see a shadow of Tim walking back and
pointed
forth.
at it too. Yeah.
It looks like Beck actually might be playing it. I see a player named Beck, which might be in the class. Yeah, that's great.
And it's very hard to get used to that kind of lag. But there you go. Hitting ramps and doing things.
What's interesting as they're playing is people have gotten used to the lag, so there's people who get on who are quite good. Because they have figured out how to play the lag and play it well, which I find amazing. That's a whole nother skill set.
Yeah.
It's true. And of course,
looks like Beck's getting the hang of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to the point, this isn't replacing actual pinball by any means. I use the word experimentation very heavily there. We wanted to see if we could do it, and we were pretty impressed that we could. And I think it's an interesting concept. It's not going to replace the physical experience at all. And, for us, it was just sort of like, what can we try out? Are there different things that we could experiment with? When, we were completely closed because of COVID. We couldn't get the arcade open. And we were like, maybe this is a way to let people start to experience some of what we have here before we get open. So fun project.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I don't know much else about Surrogate. Do they have other kinds of things that they plug into that people have used it to plug into, or is it just a lot of pinball, or do they what other kinds of things?
They have a handful of pinball machines. Now Surrogate is out of Norway, so they're on Finland. Sorry, aren't they the same? I don't know.
I'll say that.
Yeah. And so, their pinball machines that are in their office, you'll find have more lag, because of course it's having to send a signal even farther to the US and back, versus ours. But they have a handful of pinball machines. What they actually did too, and there other people have been creating some different experiences. Have you ever seen Mario Kart now has an augmented reality thing with the Nintendo Switch? Have you seen this, Zach?
No, I haven't. I don't have a Switch, so I have kind of tuned that all out. But yeah, how does that work?
So I guess apparently the idea behind it is that you can actually build a track in your house, and you can print out all the little signs and things, and then you can, and it comes with the physical Mario Kart person that you set on the ground, and then on your Switch, the thing has a camera on it. So then on your
Nice.
Switch, you are the player, but it's taking all of those printed things and it's bringing them to life. So it's using augmented reality to turn your house into a track to play Mario Kart.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Pretty cool concept.
Yeah.
They took an entire section of their office and turned it into this massive Mario Kart racetrack with 4 players, and they've got projectors on the wall and different things hanging from the ceiling and stuff. And then they connected all those Nintendo Switches to the internet for people to play it online. So you can actually play the course that they created in their office there on certain days of the week. So that was one example. They've done things like adding cranes in there, like the crane game stuff. And if people are actually successful, they'll mail the things to you.
Okay.
So,
I keep
yeah,
getting ads for that, actually. I don't know, when I'm on my phone, I keep getting like ads for the crane game thing, and it's like everybody's a winner, and then it ships it to you in the mail. I'm like, seems kind of an odd idea, but okay. Yeah.
So they've got all kinds of different experiences, and the idea behind it is just like, for them, it's like, how can you take physical things and make them available to the internet? I think right now they hooked up a Pokemon game, and they're doing sort of similar to how they do the Twitch Play stuff. Like, it's a group game where everybody gets a certain amount of time, and you jump in, and now you're playing, and now someone else jumps in and they're playing, and so it's a collaborative experience to try and beat Pokemon.
Yeah, that sounds like fun too. I've been thinking about different, all the different ways that we can collaborate and connect things together. And I haven't attempted this yet, but there's someone, a friend of mine, who I might actually bring in as a guest speaker in a couple weeks on this class. But he made a game called, or it's a game interface called Octopad. So you plug it into a Nintendo and an NES. But it's actually 8 controllers, so all the buttons that would normally be on one controller are now on individual handheld units. So you have to get a group of people together to play Tetris. Like you have to coordinate, and you have to, like, one person is like one person they have a button that's just up, and the next person next to them only has a button that pushes right, and that's all they do. And it occurs to me, like, you could also manage that online. Like you could have people still, like, everybody hits their space bar, but that spacebar is translated into whichever single button they're in charge of in a particular game. And I imagine there'd be a way to set up something like that for maybe Tetris. So I don't know, I might play with that. But anyway, there's a lot of cool opportunities for online. So it's great to see that you're able to put that in there with pinball too. So this is kind of a strange question, but something that occurred to me the other day, because I have a big CRT TV next to me right here, and I plugged in my Channel F and my Atari to it. I actually had to, students know this, but I had, how you have to get the adapter to take the video signal out of those into an RF input on those.
I probably have one over there.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I have at least 6 in my house somewhere, but I couldn't find one. Like, I was like tearing up my house trying to find one, and at the last minute I was like, screw it, I'm just going to Google how do I make these. And so I just Googled how to make it, and you can actually, because it's actually not converting the signal, it's just basically changing the shape of the input. So you just have to stick the right wires together. Basically, it wasn't that hard. So I got it working, but it's not. It's just like electrical tape, so there's still some RF interference. So it's not like perfect, but I was fairly pleased with myself for 8 minutes of work that it actually worked. But anyway, when I turned it on, my kids were like really bothered by it, not before I was even playing it, because they could hear the high-pitched like whine that CRTs make, and I can't hear that anymore. I remember I used to be able to hear it. I'm kind of curious, Tim, if your daughter has come to visit, and if she notices that, or if you notice that in the space there, is that something that you perceive like physically when you enter the reclaim space?
That's a really good question, and that would be a good experiment. Yeah, because my daughter is 10, and we've done those sort of experiments before with the different frequencies, and like, okay, like raise your hand or like lower your hand once you can no longer hear it.
Yeah.
And my hand drops long before hers does. She can continue to hear up into much higher frequencies. I've never thought to ask her about the arcade and whether or not she hears any of those kind of frequencies here or not. It might be something that she doesn't recognize because she doesn't know what she's hearing, right? And
Yeah,
I can't
maybe.
hear it at all, so I'm not calling it out. But
Right.
yeah, that's really interesting.
And also, I imagine just the sounds of the arcade games playing probably drowns it out. I think my oldest, she was mostly annoyed by it after we were done playing, but it was still on. So like the TV was on and nothing was happening, and she was off trying to read or something, and she was like, I can't concentrate. It's giving me a headache. And so that she didn't notice it earlier when we were playing a game and it was producing sound, or she didn't complain about it
I
anymore.
tell you, on that note, I do have a couple of old CRTs here in Europe, and they're on the PAL system, and so they have this different thing. But my kids, one of the Sony Trinitrons, I have two. I have a 32-inch one, and then I have like a 20-inch one, a 21 inches. And the 21-inch, there must be something in there, because when I turn it on, they like leave the room.
Yeah.
They cannot stand it. They're like, Dad, that's like super annoying. And I'm like, I can't hear anything. And they're like, Dad, I gotta go. And they leave. The other one, though, they're fine with, the bigger one. So I don't know if it's an issue with the TV. I had thought about getting it looked at, but I don't know if it was just the hum of the CRT that we had kind of become used to. But it's interesting, because that's actually, have that hooked up. This is interesting for any of you computer people out there, to a Commodore 128. Which was actually the successor of the Commodore 64, and it was only made and distributed in Europe. And my mother-in-law had a perfect mint version of it that she took out of the closet one day, and I was like, whose is that? And so I took it, and you can actually emulate C64 in the C128. So it's a super interesting computer. It's behind me, but my green screen is covering it. But it's actually, that's when I figured out or learned that my kids couldn't deal with the CRT whine. So anyway,
Yeah, that's cool. And that's cool that you found that. I have, my mom thinks we have a TRS-80 somewhere, but we haven't, she hasn't been able to find it. And I just have the Commodore VIC-20. And these are, for anyone who doesn't know, these are computers, but it's basically like a big chunky keyboard. So you buy it, it's in a box like this, and then the idea is you plug it into a TV. So it's actually not like we think of a computer as like all these things built together as a single unit. But it used to be you kind of had to buy the parts separately and assemble it, or sometimes they'd be packaged together, and then now we have the laptop and the phone and everything. But the Commodore line of computers, there you go. And Atari made a series like these too. A bunch of different Tandy, Coleco, pretty much everybody made a line of computers like this. They were relatively cheap, like they were pretty accessible for consumers that didn't want to shell out for a Mac Plus. I was fortunate in my house. We had a Mac Plus pretty early on. My dad was a programmer, so he had one from work that they let him bring home, basically, and he ended up just keeping it because by the time it was ready to give back, no one cared anymore. But it was we looked at it, and it actually had the invoice for it in the box, and it was like $2,700 in 1987, and so like that's something that would have been out of reach for most people, and he got it because it was his work computer and he brought it home, but or it was extra or something. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but that's going to be something that most people aren't going to just buy on a whim. But the VIC-20, I think the VIC-20 was under $100. And the 64 might have been a little bit more, but and certainly more capable than the VIC-20.
But it's interesting too. I mean, speaking of the C64, Atari 2600, or all those, so that's a kind of interesting point where a lot of those games were modeled on the games behind Tim, right? So a lot of the games we get, there's always like, it starts with the cabinet and then was ported to C64, Atari 2600. Very rarely was it the opposite. Oftentimes it started with the cabinet and then it started to make its way into the console. One of the, I don't know if it's an exception, but obviously Super Mario Brothers kind of broke that open.
That's what I was thinking
with the
of,
NES. But like, it's an interesting kind of relationship that the video games and the arcades had with those home consoles that started to explode. And I really love the Atari 5200. It has one of the worst joysticks in the world.
Yeah.
It's actually almost painful to play.
Yes.
But the ports for a lot of those games are really impressive. And then the C64 was even, or the Commodore 64 was even better. I mean, that was a really, like, you had an arcade in your house by and large, because they were such, they were working at the time, which was a lot of CPU, a lot of RAM. It was actually a very beefy computer. So it's interesting how that all relates to the idea of a moment of that. Speaking of which, there's one more thing that we did, Zach, that I think you'll appreciate. Students who might be bored by this, but you know what? That's part of being in class, right? But there is this thing. When we first did the UMW console living room in the Hurley Convergence Center, or the ITCC, we actually used a little hilly RF frequency project. I don't know what it was. It was basically like a antenna with a very short wave frequency that picked up the frequencies of the TV and allowed you to attach a Raspberry Pi, and we would put the shows on the loop on the Pi, and then those would be broadcast out to the local TV. So the Raspberry Pi would be using this antenna to broadcast it. Well, Tim and I bought another one, which is a blonde. It wasn't the Hilly, because we can't find those anymore. But
the company disappeared.
Blonder tongue RF modulator is actually something we're going to set up so that the console living room at Reclaim Arcade will actually show TV from a Raspberry Pi, commercials, all of it. So great. We're playing also with bringing back the TV, because I do think TV, by and large, is the real centerpiece. There it is. It's the centerpiece of the living room.
And that's something like we talked about that a little bit in the class where I did the other day. Talking about how the home video game console, like the Odyssey, we watched a short film that Magnavox put out, basically explaining to consumers what a game console was. And it shows like the family, and they're bored because it's snowing outside, and so but the dad is like, check this out, and they all gather around the TV, and like the whole living room is organized around the TV, and they're bored because they can't find any shows that everybody likes, but they're like, you can take control of your TV, and here's this thing, and then it shows them how to do that, and then it fits right in. So I agree, the TV is the center of that media ecosystem. Everything plugs into it or is alongside it or arranged so it can be viewed at the same time, like you have with the speakers there. And I think it's a very nice touch. And I do have one of those. I still have the Hilly broadcaster. I think we had two for a while, and one was Michael Branson Smith's, and he got his back. But we have. I have one of them. It's just I don't have anything to broadcast it to at the moment. The big challenge with that was, the part I contributed to that was trying to program a day of TV. So I had a bunch of video clips, but then trying to get them to play at a specific time turned out to be really challenging. So it kind of worked, but at least it worked well enough that you could see it, and it was fun to have 3 or 4 different TVs, and you could tune them all in and turn them on at the same time and watch the same show in different parts of the space on these different TVs, including that. You remember that really tiny one we got? It's like a 3-inch screen, but then because it's a CRT, it's like 1.5 feet deep, and it's I still have that one.
And it looked beautiful.
Yeah.
The resolution on that tiny screen I was like, oh my gosh, that's
impressive technology.
2020 resolution. I was impressed.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and so Tim's in the space there with the living room. I love the coffee table and the couches and the lamps.
We've managed to get all this furniture from the Habitat Restore place that's right over here, in the shopping center that we're in. So we got really lucky in terms of nailing down some of the furniture for the space. We had the vision to do this, recreate this, and we were a part of a brewery festival January, a year ago, January of last year, and we were going to be a vendor at that space, and we were like, it would be cool to not just put up a table and give out stickers. It would be nice for us to actually set some games out there. We were like, what if we created the living room and put it back to back there? And we hadn't gotten the furniture yet. We just knew we had the idea of it from what you and Jim had done, and so we were so Jim had come back to help with it, and he pulled it all together, and we've gotten some more stuff since then, but a lot of the furniture of this space is what we managed to get a week before that festival. Put it all together. We actually created a living room side by side with a very small version of the arcade with 6 games, 2 pinball machines, and some carpet underneath of it all, and gave people a sense of what Reclaim Arcade was going to be. And so that was a lot of fun. That was a year ago, and I mean, obviously well before COVID, you know,
Right.
and everything else. And our plans to open that spring at that point. But yeah,
And it was crazy because at that restore place, like that whole living room, we got something on Facebook, but most of it at restore. I think we spent maybe $300. That would be a lot. And we recreated a whole 80s living room, like bureaus, like tables, and they're nice. Like I love it.
Yeah.
Like I would live
and
there.
the
Me too.
Velvet Elvis up
Oh,
here.
the Velvet
was actually-
Elvis.
So that was actually given to us on loan by a guy named John Hayes, who's one of the directors of Heavy Metal Parking Lot.
Wow.
And so a
That's
good friend of
cool.
ours that lives in Fredericksburg, and he said, "Hey, I've got something. Do you want it?" And we were like, "Yes, we want it." And we actually Jim hung it right up there for it. So it's great, especially when the lights are off and the lights are just kind of shining on him.
Yeah, I didn't know I mean, I know that film, but I didn't know that somebody involved with it lived in Fredericksburg. That's pretty cool. But also the Elvis thing's
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, he's a huge fan of ours, as we are of his, and he's been following our work and sometimes even taking some video of us creating this space and things too. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
What was his name?
John Hain.
John Hain. Okay, cool.
So him and Jeff, I'm going to butcher the last name, Kruek or Krulek. The two Krulek. The two of them were the filmmakers for Heavy Metal Parking Lot, and John is the one that lives in Fredericksburg.
Cool. Yeah, I did not know that. Yeah, great. And it's cool. Like, I mean, that's an example of how you've already. I mean, you've got kind of a community. Like you've built a community of people that are fans and followers and are ready to jump in and enjoy the space as soon as they can.
Exactly.
So we've been going about an hour, maybe a little bit more, because we had a slow start there. So I want to start moving towards the end, I guess, and just maybe a couple more questions. And so students, if you're still watching, it looks like many of you still are. Get your questions in if you have them. But one thing I'd like to ask both of you is just if you could tell us about like just what you think is maybe your favorite game that you have, or the most unusual, or maybe, and if Tim, if it's nearby, if you can give us a look at it, that would be cool. Like, is there anything? I mean, you've shown us a few already, but are there any that kind of jump out as particularly unique or a favorite of yours to play?
You go first, Jim, and I'll go show whatever game you're doing while I think through mine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different games, obviously, that one could highlight. For me, the game, I was part of Pac-Man Fever in 1980. I got into video gaming because of Pac-Man. Like, I would steal quarters from my mom to go out and play this game as much as I could. And this game for me is still the arcade. Like, that's the game that, like, for me, started it. We got a lot of maze games that ripped off of it, like Make Tracks and Mousetrap, and there's a bunch of them. But this, for me, is the cultural, the icon of that early 80s arcade moment. We had a speed shift in this one, which you didn't have back in the day. But I think there's a really interesting history between Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man that's worth discussing. You probably talked about that at length.
Not yet, but yeah.
You know more about that than me. But I just think, like, bar none, Pac-Man for me is the game. When I go back, that's the game I play. That's the game I love. There's some other fun ones like Elevator Action, Congo Bongo, which is kind of a failed 3D attempt. The idea of Vanguard, you shoot from all sides. Like, there's a lot of interesting games, but Pac-Man is the game.
Yeah.
That's the.
Yeah, Pac-Man is iconic for a good reason. I think it's a fun game to play. Like, I think it really works, and that helps a lot.
I read an article recently, I think it was shared through like the Freeform Radio WFMU, where there was a philosopher who was talking about Pac-Man, that the reason why Pac-Man is so successful, or was so successful, I mean, I think it's still in the top 10 all-time greatest selling games, is that it actually humanized the idea through eating. Like, the idea of eating.
Interesting.
And the idea of actually becoming more powerful as a result of eating certain things, like Popeye with eating the spinach.
Yeah.
You actually really created this compelling narrative that really linked it. Someone was joking about ghosts in the chat in Discord, and for me, when I think about ghosts, I think about the ghosts of Pac-Man. I think about the relationship between Pac-Man being afraid of them and running from them, and then turning and eating power, and then going after them, and then you have that time to get and it's over, and it's just, and the little intermissions, and the fact that even within 1980, from 1979 with Galaxian, they were actually linking back by saying one of the things you'll eat is a Galaxian icon.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So there's this weird textuality as early as 1980 between those early games.
Yeah, those early Namco games.
Anyway.
Yeah, and those cutscenes were the first video game cutscenes, like the thing that we sort of, now it's like these cinematics, the storytelling, and so on. But that was the first one, was the Pac-Man, like the Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man like meeting. And I don't know, I'm not familiar with the thing you were listening to there, but it sounds like something Ian Bogost might say. I don't know if that was him, but he's a person who is often introduced as a philosopher and talks about Pac-Man a lot, and so that might be it. But the background with the Miss Pac-Man, just the short version of it is that Miss Pac-Man was basically a bootleg hack of Pac-Man, and then eventually Namco was like, hey, this is pretty good, and so they ended up kind of releasing it as their own thing. So, but it was that's the short version of that, because it'd be at that point like. Arcade owners, they could get you could buy the cabinet, but then sometimes you could just buy a replacement board to transform your Pac-Man into Miss Pac-Man or Galaxian or something, and so that was kind of the bootleg marketplace that I don't know the people off the top of my head, but they were able to produce a thing that would turn it into Miss Pac-Man, basically the Pac-Man icon with the bow, and it's a much more it's still a really good game, but new mazes and stuff, so. It's really cool.
I'll actually find, I know that I have the article, so I find it and let you know if it was Ian Bogost or not.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, he's a good one.
There's in fact, I think if I recall, there's an interesting story out there about a game called Crazy Otto, and I think that's the origin of Miss Pac-Man, and that was the bootleg version they had created that then Namco took over. So there's somebody who actually, it's super cool. Somebody who actually did a full-on restore, I'll put it here in the chat, of an original Crazy Otto, which is a game that really did never exist. So.
Oh, nice. Wow.
So that game never existed, but the ROM was created for it. This was them playing around with the idea of modifying the graphics on it to make the characters look differently, to make the gameplay a little bit different. And Namco then took that idea and turned it into Miss Pac-Man. So the person took the ROMs from it, created original artwork for it, and turned it into an actual game.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's fun.
Cool. And so I just linked that Pac-Man, how Pac-Man revolutionized gaming by Noah Wardrip Fruin.
I know his work. So he just came out with a new book. So this might be a excerpt from his new book. And
it's interesting as we're moving into chef culture and everything's about eating and stuff. Like Pac-Man gains a new relevance as an eater, right? As a kind of like a foodie, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
So, I'll pick your game.
That's a good way to think of it. I like that.
All right.
Cool,
so my favorite game.
Yeah.
I have two, but they are very closely related for certain reasons. Okay. One, when I look through all the games here, the one that I can't stop playing, it's Robotron. So I'll go over here. Robotron is such a difficult game, and it's again, when we think about like games that would be hard to emulate, the controller, there's actually two joysticks. And so you're holding both joysticks. One is moving up and down, and the other one's firing up, down, left, right. And so you've got eight-way joysticks for both hands, and you're constantly shooting all the people around you, and it's almost like a gauntlet style. Like all of these things are coming at you. It's a very fast-paced game. I've got to hold my laptop, so I've only got one hand, but you'd normally be going and picking up, you're saving these humans from the aliens there. This is gorgeous. Not a game for anybody that suffers from epilepsy, because like the transitions between the levels are just insane. And the whole thing, I mean, it's a super fun game, and the controllers and everything, it's so fast paced that I always find myself, I finish a game and going, one more, and I start another one and start another one. And so I really love that game. And so then the actual sequel to that, by the same designer, is Smash TV, which, as Jim mentioned, was the game that I restored here, and I'm still in the process, obviously, of fixing it up. And so, unfortunately, he said I can't show you the gameplay because it's got that issue on the screen. But what's crazy about Smash TV is the concept of it, because the game was based on loosely based, on the movie The Running Man, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the whole idea behind this game is that you've got two contestants that are in a game show, and they kind of look like American Gladiator types, and they're fighting for their lives, and they have to kill everybody. And meanwhile, you've got this like game show host who's like, oh man, all the prizes, more money, more prizes, you want a VCR, and all the they're cheering for you, and you are fighting for your life. So it is the trippiest thing. So I've been restoring that cabinet, and similar gameplay. So they did the two joysticks. So you've got moving and you've got firing. So it's the similar type of concept, but this one was an early 90s game. So you had full color graphics, you had, and that was one of the first games that actually had blood too. It had blood and guts and stuff. So it was really, this was before Mortal Kombat. So this was before the rating system came into play or anything. And people were like, whoa, we're doing that? Like, I just saw an eyeball fly off that guy. And so it was a serious thing too. And so they're two very closely related games, and they're both very special to me because of that.
Yeah, that's a great one. Let me see. I remember I played that one whenever you guys had this sort of transitional space, and I brought my kids in to try some things out, and I remember playing that, and like, I was like, I'm not sure if I want my kids to play this. I was like, this might be a bit much. But I was interested in it because I'm looking at the year that came out.
1990?
1990. Okay,
90,
yeah. It says 90 on Wikipedia. Oh, and it's Eugene Jarvis. Yeah, cool. So this is for the class, I had them take a look at an article about Death Race, which is a 1976 game based on the movie Death Race 2000. And I think the vibe I got from Smash TV was kind of like from that movie, where it's like a nationwide like game show for students. Students have read this, but I don't know if you all remember. But the Death Race 2000 movie, you've got David Carradine and Sylvester Stallone and they're contestants in this game where they have to basically drive across the country running over people, and you've got it's all like organized around like a TV show, and so there's like an announcer kind of hyping up the different vehicular manslaughter things they're doing, like the ways that they're murdering people, and so it's similar to that announcer in Smash TV. So that's what reminded me of that. And I was just looking at your list. You all don't have a Death Race, do you? Death Race cabinet? No. Yeah, I don't know how many of those are, if they're collectible or whatever, but it would be interesting to see them. But that was the article we read was talking about that in the context of the first video game, the first moral panic about video game violence was around Death Race, because you run over skeletons that look kind of like people, and they kind of scream when you run over them, and so that was enough to make people worry. But also they had the narrative context of this controversial movie, and so whenever they see the stick figures, they're not just seeing stick figures, they're seeing the pedestrians that David Carradine is running over. So it's that narrative context of the movie made it kind of disturbing when you play the game, and so I can kind of see the point there. But ultimately, we have other concerns in terms of graphics and violence as things go forward. Like, do you all have a Mortal Kombat?
I actually was just staring at it, and I was going to mention it because that's of course when the rating system came into play. Yeah, was when Mortal Kombat came out. So we had Mortal Kombat 1 and 2.
Oh, good.
Over here. And it's I mean, even just in some of the cutscenes, we could probably see some of the violence that they show in there. I mean, it's which it seems tame now. Oh, I love this too, right? Like, send in for your Mortal Kombat comic book, Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah, you should try that address. See if anybody still responds.
The offer expires November 1st, 1993. It turns out.
Just missed it.
But that's right. Yeah, like, I mean, this stuff. I mean, and this Mortal Kombat, I believe, was 93. And yeah, so that started the whole rating system where
Right.
you finally had some restrictions on some of the stuff, but
Yeah.
it is something else.
Yeah, the ESRB, and the ESRB is kind of parallel to like the motion picture AA, whatever
Right.
the MPAA stands for, where it's an industry group that is the industry trying to self-regulate in order to avoid government regulation or FCC regulation. So but it still has the same effect in terms of content, and it's still a thing. I mean, people still use it to rate content. But yeah, Mortal Kombat was kind of the one that sort of made it necessary. And I talked about that a little bit yesterday. I was talking about different generations of game consoles, and that was like the big conflict for the like 16-bit era, Super Nintendo versus Genesis. Like when Super Nintendo finally did a port for Mortal Kombat, they did it with like the blood splatter was like gray sweat splatter instead of actual blood, and so it's like, you know, it's a way for Nintendo to try to keep its squeaky clean image, but also provide this game that, you know, that sell this game that people really want. But you know, it's this really awkward compromise. But Genesis, they went full blood, and so that's where their ad campaign was Genesis does what Nintendo don't. But it was also, I think, in some cases, they do what Nintendo won't do. Like we'll be the edgy teenagers and you know, show full blood and gore, and that was a big part of their marketing. We looked at some Sega Genesis commercials. Those are crazy. Like those are really intense visuals and bizarre ideas. So anyway, those are fun. Let's see. I think we should probably wrap it up pretty soon. This has been a really fun conversation. It's been great to hear from you guys and see the space. But we still, you know, we still have a lot of viewers. So maybe just anything else people should know about the space, like when they can visit and kind of how to make a reservation, that kind of thing.
Well, as it turns out, Tim, we might have some information on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So reclaimarcade.com, we actually announced last week that we're getting open at the end of the month. So January 29th is our first day that we'll be open. We're opening from Friday to Sunday. So every weekend we'll have them. The way we decided to do it, because obviously the pandemic is still going on, and that's been the biggest struggle is, you know, when is it ever going to be safe, you know? And we wanted to see how we could do this safely, and we decided to do it similar. If you've ever done an escape room or you've ever done these kind of experiences where you book a time slot, that's how we're doing it. So we have these 2-hour blocks on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, several different sessions throughout the day. And we're able, because of that, to limit the entire space to 20 people. And so you can buy tickets for 1 or 2 people, or you can buy the entire space if you want. You know, that's quite a bit more expensive, you know, certainly for a student. But you know, for a single person, it's $20, and you get to come. All of our games are on free play, so none of the actual experience costs any money. You can play all the games, you can play the pinball, you can hang out in the living room, watch videos that you borrow from the Reclaim Video. So the 2-hour session, you can do whatever you want within it, and it's $20 per person. So yeah, and if you go on the website, you can book that, and that's the way we'll run for now. And then hopefully, as COVID starts to clear out, we can think through alternative ways that we might open this up more broadly to people. So yeah, but we're excited to finally get open and see people enjoy the space as much as we've enjoyed creating it.
Yeah, I can't wait to come check it out. I mean, I've seen it in various stages, but it looks beautiful. I don't know. I'm really impressed with what you all have accomplished there, and you know, it's from an archival preservation standpoint, certainly, but it looks like a lot of fun to go hang out. So I look forward to doing that. I'm going to book some time as soon as I can, and I don't want to promise anything, but like, so this class ends before you all open, and my students that are taking the class are geographically distributed right now, but it might be possible, if they're interested in, like, once the semester starts, I might look into seeing if we can get like a mini grant from UMW. Maybe it would be to help pay for it, but we might be able to book the whole space for the class as kind of a reunion at some point. It would be technically a reunion if it's in a few weeks, but yeah, I'm gonna look into that if any of them are interested.
Remember that crazy class we took just a few weeks ago?
Yeah, no, back in those times, the olden times. Yeah, but I mean,
in the age of COVID,
right.
A week is a month. You know,
It is.
a
It
few
seems
weeks,
so
is
crazy.
like a year or so.
Yeah, right.
It
And we
works.
just heard this morning that UMW is going to delay their move-in date a week, so we'll be virtual for the first week of the spring semester, which starts pretty soon. But then we'll be virtual for at least that first week, and then go from there. So certainly I'll wait until there's a reasonable chance of people actually being around and in town and available for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
To just try to
I'll
figure
tell you
something
though,
out. But
it's good to hear though, Zach, you talk about getting the students and using the space, because I mean, part of what Tim and we come out of that world is we see this as an experience for people who are studying it, who are thinking about that, to give it context and to think about like all the culture that surrounds it. I was just reading a Patricia Highsmith novel called Found in the Street. And one of the things that I found, and I didn't expect this, it's about this stalker in Manhattan in the mid 80s. And that's the main part of the book.
Okay.
But he works at it's 1984, he works at an arcade in Times Square. And a big part of the book is dedicated to describing just how sleazy these arcades are, and just like his hatred of humanity that come in and deal drugs and
well, Times Square, like that's Times Square in the '80s too, right? Like that's that environment, right? That's
and it's interesting because there's like other different cultural things I love. Like there's a movie from 1984, I think too. It's called Nightmares, and that movie features Emilio Estevez, who's actually hustling in a arcade in downtown Los Angeles to make money to go back to the suburbs and beat the Bishop of Battle. Yeah, and it's a really interesting look at actually the aesthetics of these arcades.
Isn't I want to say he's like he plays Berserk in that movie, I think, if I remember.
Yes.
Yeah, and you all have a Berserk. That's definitely one I want to check out. I don't think you had it last time I was there, but I've got a special fondness for Berserk. So, all right. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up. But thanks so much for joining us and telling us a few things and showing us some things. I love the project. I love what you're doing. This is so cool, and it was so cool to get you all working. Once we got the stream working, to get you all here to talk through some things. So thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll be able to visit in person soon. So
absolutely, I appreciate you having us.
Yeah, no problem. And students, just real quick before you go, tomorrow is going to be a pretty informal day, but I do plan to stream. It'll just be pretty casual though, mainly just in case you want to chat about your projects or anything else. But I'll probably be online for at least part of that, maybe to demo a couple things. But pretty casual. This is really the end of the organized part of this week in terms of content and things that you watch like this. So it's been a long week for me at least, but hopefully it's been a good one for you all as you've been starting this week. Anyway, Jim and Tim, thanks a lot. And students, thanks for watching, or whoever else is watching. And I'll see you all later. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.